I want to start today with a question. And fair warning, it sounds really simple, but it might actually break your brain a little bit if you really try to answer it. You ready?
I was born ready. Let's hear it.
Here it is. What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Ah, the contrarian question. It sounds like a parlor trick, doesn't it? Like something you'd hear at a dinner party.
It totally does, but it's actually incredibly hard to answer. I tried this on myself earlier, just, prepping for this. My first reaction was to say things like, oh, our political system is broken. Or maybe there is no God.
Sure, the standard ones.
Right. But then I realized, millions, tens of millions of people agree with those
Not
statements.
exactly. You haven't found a truth. You've found a side in debate. That's the trap.
Yeah.
To answer it properly, you have to find some kind of delusion that almost everyone else is buying into, and then see the reality behind it.
You have to find something that sounds crazy now, but will be obvious in, 20 years.
Yeah, common sense later on.
And that question is basically the battering ram that opens the book we're diving into today. 0 to 1, Notes on Startups, or How to Build the Future by Peter Thiel with Blake Masters.
This is a classic for sure, a real Silicon Valley canon text. But if you're listening and you're expecting a guide on, how to write a business plan or something.
Or how to manage a cap table.
Yeah, you are going to be surprised. This is basically a philosophy book that's just disguised as business advice.
That's totally the vibe I got. It feels more like a manifesto on how to break out of the status quo.
Yeah.
It's aggressive. And the mission of this deep dive, I think, it isn't just to talk about startups. It's to figure out why we've maybe stopped solving big problems and how we could start again.
Thiel's argument is really provocative. He basically believes we've confused two very different types of progress. We've become obsessed with copying what works, which he calls globalization, and we've done it at the expense of actually creating new things, technology.
And looking at the notes, this gets pretty uncomfortable pretty fast. We're going to talk about why he thinks competition is actually a destructive force, why disrupting industries is a total trap, and why we need to stop treating our lives like lottery tickets.
It goes against almost everything they teach you in an MBA program. So yeah, let's get into it.
Okay, let's unpack the title first. 0 to 1. It's a metaphor for that distinction you just made.
Right. So Thiel visualizes progress on two different axes. First, you have what he calls horizontal progress. That's going from 1 to n.
One to many.
1 to many. You take something that already exists, let's say a typewriter, and you just build 100 more typewriters.
You're copying. You're scaling it up.
You're copying. And on a global scale, this is globalization. It's taking things that work in, say, the US or Europe, like railroads, air conditioning, and making them work in places like China or India. It's necessary, but it's not creation. It's just replication.
Okay, so that's horizontal. Then there's vertical progress.
Vertical progress is going from 0 to 1. This is doing something that nobody has ever done before. So if you take that typewriter and instead of building more of them, you invent a word processor. That is vertical progress. That's technology.
The book makes a pretty dark point about this, though. It suggests that a world focused only on the copying part, on globalization, is actually doomed.
Well, it's a resource problem, right? I mean, if China just copies the West, if they double their energy production using the exact same tools from the 20th century, the environmental impact is catastrophic. Globalization without new technology, it's just not sustainable.
So if 0 to 1 is so important, why is it so rare? Why do we always default to copying?
Because 0 to 1 is incredibly risky. Going from 1 to n is safe. The path is already lit for you. But going from 0 to 1 means you're walking into the dark. And Thiel argues that the whole business world is kind of suffering from a specific form of PTSD that keeps us on that safe path.
You're talking about the dot-com crash?
Precisely. The crash in 2000 was so traumatic for Silicon Valley that it completely rewrote the rule book. The industry basically came up with these 4 lessons from the disaster that have become like absolute dogma. You hear them everywhere.
Okay, let me guess. Number 1 has to be make incremental advances.
That's the one. Small steps, safe steps. Lesson 2 is stay lean and flexible, which is really just code for don't make a concrete plan.
The pivot.
Right. Lesson 3, improve on the competition. So don't create a new market, just serve an existing one a little bit better. And 4, focus on product, not sales. The whole if you build it, they will come idea.
I feel like I see these on LinkedIn every single day. Iterate, pivot, minimum viable product. It's like the religion of the startup world.
And Thiel just says they're all wrong. He argues this whole lean startup thing is a defense mechanism. It's not a real strategy. He flips every one of them. He says boldness is better than triviality. A bad plan is actually better than no plan. And sales matter just as much as the product.
I want to pull on that thread about competition, because this is the part of the book that feels the most un-American, maybe. We're raised to believe competition is healthy. It's the engine of capitalism. But he says, and I'm quoting here, competition is for losers.
It's a really jarring statement, but you have to look at it from a purely economic lens. You know, in Econ 101, they teach you about perfect competition. It's held up as the ideal state for a market, but what actually happens in perfect competition?
Prices get driven down to the bottom.
Exactly. Prices get driven down to the marginal cost of production, which means if there's any money to be made, new companies will flood in, they'll undercut you, and poof, your margins are gone. In a perfectly competitive market, nobody makes a profit. You're all just sort of surviving.
So he's saying that capitalism and competition are actually opposites.
Yes. That's the big unlock. Capitalism is about the accumulation of capital, of profits. Competition is about the erosion of those profits. The example he uses is really stark. He compares U.S. airlines to Google.
Okay, so airlines feel super important. They literally enable the global economy. You can't have globalization without them.
They create huge value for society, absolutely, but they capture almost none of it because they're in this fierce, cutthroat competition. Historically, their profit margins are just razor thin.
I think I saw the number in the notes. It was something insane.
Yeah, in 2012, the average airline ticket was $178, and the airline made 37 cents of profit on it.
37 cents. That is depressing. Okay, so what about Google?
Google creates less total value than the entire global airline industry for sure, but Google is a monopoly. It stands completely alone in search, so it captures a huge amount of the value it creates. Its profit margins are massive compared to airlines, over 20%.
But wait a minute, companies don't usually run around bragging about being monopolies. Isn't that like the best way to get broken up by the government?
And that brings us to what he calls the lies. He argues that because everyone is scared of monopolies, everyone lies about their market position, but they lie in opposite directions. Well, monopolists lie to protect themselves. They want to look small. So Google doesn't say, we are the undisputed kings of search. They say, oh, we're just a small player in the global advertising market.
Right. So if you count TV ads and magazine ads and billboards, suddenly Google looks like this tiny little slice of a giant pie. Don't regulate us. We're just a little guy.
Exactly. They define their market as broadly as possible to hide how dominant they are. But the non-monopolists, the companies that are stuck in that competitive hell, they tell the opposite lie. They want to feel unique. So they define their market incredibly narrowly.
That was the example in the book about the British restaurant in Palo Alto, right?
Right. The owner says, we're the only place serving British food in Palo Alto. We have a monopoly. But the reality is people aren't just choosing between different kinds of British food. They're choosing between that and sushi and burgers and just staying home to cook.
So the restaurant defines itself by the one thing that makes it different, to hide the fact that it's actually the same as everyone else fighting for that same dinner dollar.
It's a coping mechanism. And Thiel paraphrases Tolstoy here. He says, all happy companies are different. Each one earns a monopoly by solving a unique problem. All failed companies are the same. They failed to escape competition.
That really changes how you look at business rivalries. It makes them seem, I don't know, kind of pointless.
He uses the Romeo and Juliet analogy, the Montagues and the Capulets. They aren't fighting because they're so different. They're fighting because they're exactly the same. They're just obsessed with each other. Look at the tech wars in the 2000s. Microsoft versus Google.
Right, Bing versus Google search, Internet Explorer versus Chrome.
They were so focused on beating each other that they completely missed the threat coming from the side. Apple came out with mobile, and suddenly that whole desktop war didn't even matter anymore. Apple won because they built something new to one, while Microsoft and Google were just busy copying each other one to end.
It reminds me of that picture from the notes about the credit card readers. Square comes out with that cool white square reader. So then PayPal makes a triangle one, then someone else makes like a cylinder. It's just geometry wars.
It's imitation, not innovation. That's just anxiety.
Okay, so let's say we buy the premise. We want to avoid competition. We want to build a monopoly. But how? I mean, you can't just declare yourself a monopoly.
No, and Thiel is the first to admit there's no secret formula. But he does identify 4 characteristics that you tend to see in all durable monopolies.
Right, walk us through them.
Okay, so first is proprietary technology. And the rule of thumb here is really strict. Your solution has to be at least 10 times better than the closest substitute.
10 times. Wow, that's a high bar. Why not just, a little bit better?
Because if it's only, say, 10% better, people won't switch. Their habits are too ingrained. A marginal improvement isn't enough to get them to change. Think about Amazon in the 90s. They didn't just have a few more books than a bookstore. They had practically every book. It was an order of magnitude difference.
Okay, so 10x tech. What's next on the list?
Number two is network effects. The product has to get better the more people use it. Facebook is the classic example here. If you're the only person on Facebook, it's totally useless. If all your friends are there, it's indispensable.
But there's a real catch-22 there, isn't there? You can't just launch with a massive network on day one.
Which leads directly to probably the most actionable piece of advice in the entire book. Start small. This is where so many ambitious people mess up. We want to conquer the world, so we try to sell to everybody, but you can't get a network effect going in a massive market.
So you find a tiny, tiny group of people.
A tiny group that you can absolutely dominate. Facebook started only at Harvard. PayPal focused only on the power sellers on eBay. They got to huge market share in those little ponds before they even thought about moving to the ocean.
So it's better to own like 80% of a really small niche market than 1% of a massive one.
Always. Because inside that little niche, you can build your monopoly, you can generate cash flow, and then you can expand outward. Amazon started with books, then CDs, then electronics, and now, well, everything. But if they had tried to be the everything store from day one, they would have died.
We missed the other two characteristics.
Right. Economies of scale, which is why software businesses are so great, because the cost of adding one more user is basically zero. And finally, number four is branding.
And Apple's the gold standard there?
The gold standard, yes, but with a huge warning attached. You cannot build a company on brand alone. Thiel points to Yahoo under Marissa Mayer. She tried to make the company cool again, changed the logo, bought hip startups, but there was no underlying 10x technology. It was just a fresh coat of paint. Branding amplifies a monopoly. It can't create one from scratch.
I also want to touch on the word disruption. It's such a buzzword. Everyone wants to be a disruptor. But Thiel seems to really hate it.
He does, because disruption defines you by your relationship to the old thing. If you say, I'm going to disrupt the record industry, like Napster did, you're picking a fight. You're framing your entire identity around your enemy.
You're just poking the bear.
And the bear will wake up and kill you. Napster got sued into oblivion, Thiel says. Don't disrupt. Don't focus on the old guard at all. Just go build a better house somewhere else. If your product is truly 10x better, the old model just becomes irrelevant on its own. You don't have to declare war.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I want to pivot now to what I found to be the most challenging part of this whole deep dive, the philosophical debate between luck and planning.
Yeah, this is where Thiel really goes after the modern worldview. We live in a culture that absolutely loves to attribute success to luck. You have Malcolm Gladwell talking about outliers, or Warren Buffett calling himself a member of the Lucky Sperm Club.
It's almost like a humble brag. Oh, I just got lucky. It feels polite to say it.
Thiel thinks that politeness is actually dangerous. He argues that if success were just a lottery ticket, you wouldn't see serial entrepreneurs. You wouldn't have an Elon Musk founding PayPal, then Tesla, then SpaceX. You wouldn't have a Jack Dorsey doing Twitter and then Square. These guys aren't winning the lottery 4 times in a row. They are designing their success.
To explain this, he sets up this matrix of how different civilizations view the future. It's a little complex, but I think it explains so much about how the world feels today.
It's a 2x2 matrix, so on one axis you can be optimistic or pessimistic, and on the other you can view the future as either definite, meaning we can plan for it, or indefinite, meaning it's basically random.
Okay, so let's break the 4 quadrants down. Let's start with indefinite pessimism.
That's modern Europe, according to Thiel. They are pessimistic. They think the future will be worse than the present, but they're indefinite about it. They don't know how it will decline, so they just kind of drift. It's the eat, drink, and be merry philosophy while the ship slowly sinks.
That's fearful. Okay, then there's definite pessimism.
That would be China. They are pessimistic. They see resource constraints, demographic problems, but they are very definite about it. They are planning furiously to survive. Building massive cities, locking down resources around the globe. It's a grim outlook, but it's very intentional.
And then we have the golden era, definite optimism.
That was the U.S. in the 1950s and 60s. We imagined a much better future, and we had a specific, concrete plan to get there. The Apollo program, The interstate highway system, the Manhattan Project, we didn't just hope things would get better, we actually engineered it.
Which brings us to where we are now
Yeah.
in the U.S. Indefinite optimism.
This is the one that really stings. We are optimistic. We generally think the future will be better, but we have absolutely no idea how. We think progress is something that just happens automatically, like evolution.
And this is where the financialization of everything comes from, right?
Exactly. Because we don't have a specific plan, we don't commit to anything. Instead, we diversify. We hedge our bets. Just think about the advice that every high-achieving college student gets. Don't pick one career. Get a resume with tons of extracurriculars. Go into consulting or finance so you can keep your options open.
Oh man, that hits home. The option value trap. You spend your whole life just collecting lottery tickets hoping one of them pays out instead of actually building the thing you want to build.
Thiel sees it as a kind of societal disease. We treat our lives like a diversified portfolio. He compares the software industry to biotech. Software is usually definite. You write code to do a specific thing. But biotech has become indefinite. Researchers are just randomly testing thousands of molecules, hoping one of them turns out to be a miracle drug.
So he's calling for a return to definite optimism, to intelligent design.
Yes. And his ultimate example is Steve Jobs. People think Jobs was just this creative genius, like a magician, but Thiel argues Jobs was a master planner. The iPod wasn't just some random experiment. It was a step in a multi-year definite plan to move the entire world to a post-PC era. Jobs didn't ask customers what they wanted. He designed the future he wanted to see.
It's really a call to agency. We have more control than we think we do.
That is the core message of the whole book. We've been sort of lulled into thinking the world is random, so we should just hedge our bets. Thiel is trying to shake us by the shoulders and say, no, you can actually build the future if you're willing to commit to a specific, bold plan.
There is one last concept we should probably touch on which ties this whole thing together, the power law.
This is really the mathematical backbone for everything we've discussed. In a diversified world, the world of indefinite optimism, we assume everything falls in a neat bell curve. Most things are average. But in the real world of startups and creation, it's a power law distribution.
The 80-20 rule, but on steroids.
More like the 991 rule. The biggest secret in venture capital is that the single best investment in a fund will equal or outperform the entire rest of the fund combined. Just one company, a Facebook, a Google, creates more value than all the other startups put together.
Which means that diversifying your efforts is actually a losing strategy.
Right. If you spread yourself thin across 10 average ideas, you've guaranteed mediocrity. You will miss the one thing that has exponential growth. The source basically tells you to concentrate. Put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket very, very carefully.
That is both a terrifying and an exhilarating thought. It demands so much conviction.
It does, but that's where all the value is created. The crowded path, the safe path, the diversified path, that's where all the competition is. And as we've learned, competition is for losers.
So here is the provocation we want to leave you with today, based on this whole manifesto. Look at your career, look at your life right now. Are you operating in a state of indefinite optimism? Are you just collecting options, diversifying your skills, and kind of hoping for a lucky break?
Or are you willing to do the uncomfortable thing? Can you find a small niche that you can own, ignore what everyone else is fighting over, and draft a real blueprint for a future that doesn't exist yet?
Stop copying. Start creating. Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.